Jaws from 1975, starring or directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Roy Schneider, Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss, who had a tiny uncredited cameo in The Graduate as one of the roommates, and then Mrs. Robinson's husband is the mayor from Jaws, one of the more famous villains in history of film. So IMDb plot summary. When a killer shark unleashes chaos on a beach community off Long Island, it's up to a local sheriff, a marine biologist, and an old seafarer to hunt the beast down. So this film, to me, had to be number one. It's a movie you would watch every summer growing up around 4th of July. The movie takes place around the 4th of July weekend. Similar to it kind of combines in a way like my last two choices into a perfect encapsulation of it. There is the vacation element, people coming to this island to go on a vacation, beach vacation, something I always associated with the summer that my family would do all the time. Has all the, the elements of, again, like 4th of July, like I mentioned, the key holiday of the summer that I would always look forward to for, the reason of usually go to the beach or have fun. But it is also, maybe the prototype for I don't want to say the modern blockbuster, because I think we've actually moved beyond what the impact of what Jaws had done. But at least on me growing up, like movies like Zorro that I mentioned and some of those other films too, definitely owe its DNA to what Steven Spielberg did in this film, in terms of giving you the humor, giving you the action, giving you the suspense, all the different parts. Maybe not the sexiness, though, Robert Shaw is pretty sexy as that seafaring sailor guy in a certain way. So maybe he does the Catherine Zeta-Jones part in this.
I would say Schneider.
Really? Over Dreyfuss even? Okay. Schneider. Yeah. Okay.
We'll get into it. Dreyfuss.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would pick Robert Shaw as the sexy old seafaring guy, but maybe that's just my personal taste. But yeah, again, iconography is all there. And then the roller coaster ride of the summer, what I associate with summer blockbusters. So I'd watch this movie every year growing up on 4th of July. And to me, this is the summer movie. If I were to pick one that I feel like every time I see Jaws, I'm like, oh, summer's coming up. I got to watch Jaws.
That's awesome. Yeah. So funnily enough, I had never seen this movie from beginning to end until
interesting.
Which is
cool.
Kind of silly and maybe even shameful to admit because it's such an iconic film, but I'm obviously familiar with it. And like you, in some of the other movies we talked about, I'd seen images of this movie and scenes of this movie which are practically memes at this point. So it was sort of interesting to kind of go back and watch a movie that is so memeified and so part of our culture. And I also made the mistake of actually watching it on a smaller screen as opposed to my big screen. So I think I have to correct that a little bit because I think the experience was a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, what can I say more about Jaws? Like, it's obviously incredible. And I know a lot about the backstory of how Spielberg made it and the filming of this movie and how cheaply it was done. And the fact that this movie is so elevated for what little money and effects and what have you that they had access to. It's kind of mind-boggling what they were able to achieve. The thing that I was struck with, a few things. One, I thought the earlier part of the movie, and this is clearly my own sort of thing that I lean towards, was even stronger than the back half of what is happening, how the town is reacting. And yes, the mayor is, the quote unquote villain, but it was very humanizing,
Totally.
There's greed, but there's also interest of the small business owners, and this is sort of their big weekend, and there's resistance and hesitation. It sort of reminded me a lot of when COVID was happening, like how different people react to a massive disaster that you don't really have an understanding of, and you are going to get different kinds of reactions. And I think that's okay, actually. You can't just get on your high horse. No matter what side you might be, you have to find a way to argue and have a dialogue about it, which you see that happen, And then I thought the scenes with the boys, especially that table scene of the boy mimicking the father, so sweet. I kind of teared up a little bit just watching that. The few glances that Roy Schneider and his wife share, even though she doesn't have much to do, sort of prototypical movie wife, but the few glances that they share when he's leaving and such, you see that this relationship is lived in, that
Oh
there's
yeah.
something real about that, which is, the mastery of Spielberg, and, kudos to these actors. So I don't know. I found that first part of the movie way more compelling. It sort of drags and drifts, and I feel even weird saying this about a movie like Jaws. And maybe this is because I watched it on a small screen, but I found myself distracted when we were sort of on the wild goose chase of finding the shark.
Ah.
But and of course, it's John Williams, great score.
Oh yeah.
Can't give him any notes, but I will say this, that I prefer movies when the score is sort of held back. And this movie, the theme, of course, is iconic. I
Right.
wish we had just left it to that. And maybe this is a summer blockbuster thing that every second of the movie has to be scored.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it quite distracting, to be honest, when little victories would happen, when the battles are out. Now the music is theme park music.
Oh, I love that.
And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, what is happening? So this is just my thing. I felt similarly about Crusade as well, our Indiana Jones movie. Every single second is scored.
Yeah.
Just not my thing. I can sort of then, what I start to see is an orchestra room. I can see the violinists, and I'm not watching the movie. That's what happens to my brain when
Oh, interesting.
that happens. So it pulls me out. But I get it. It's a summer movie. The point is to have fun. I can only imagine if you were sitting in a big theater and that music was playing and that's how you first saw it. It's going to be so thrilling and so, amazing. So I get that. But, watching it now like this, that sort of was my experience. But obviously, yeah, when it comes to summer movies, everything you said, I agree. But this is
That's an interesting note on the score. I mean, I think John Williams and this film, and then Star Wars and Superman, like those three scores brought back the full orchestral, always music, noticeable
not
themes,
Superman, which is why I picked it.
Oh, well, that score is very important in what Williams was doing.
But not every single second is scored in a Superman.
Fair. But this was the way that movies were made in the 30s, especially with these action adventure scores that Ron Williams and Spielberg was kind of going back to with this film, and they ushered in this age of maybe 20, 30 years where the music was heavily I mean, everyone was going back to what Williams did, I think, starting here, and now it's, in a way, we've kind of come into this period where, especially with summer movies, there is a score, but it's not memorable. It's background music. It's a temp track. We're going back to this, like, well, the score is not as important anymore about setting the mood. It's more about the visuals and the effects and things like that. But yeah, I actually think I get your point of the third act of this film when it turns into the sea adventure movie. Like, it's interesting. As a kid, that wasn't necessarily my favorite part, but I've now grown to think that is now my favorite part of that movie, because it's more of a throwback to the old, old films. And I love John Williams' score even beyond the theme. So I kind of come across that as well. And I also love Quint. Robert Shaw's character, I think, steals the show. So anytime he's on screen,
he is great.
It's just like, this movie's so
fascinating, complicated character.
So amazing. Yeah.
And so many shades are being played. You think he's one thing at a time, but then he's another thing at another time.
Yeah.
That's a pretty great. And I'm glad they put him in, because if he were not in, I think that whole third act would be actually quite boring.
Mm-hmm. No, so, yeah. Well, he serves a purpose too. I mean, the movie is a lot about masculinity, and maybe that's another topic we can explore at some other point. But it's three kind of aspects of what masculinity the modern male could represent, and they're all there on that ship. And it's like, who ends up defeating the bad guy? How do they do it? I mean, I think that is a lot of what Spielberg is trying to say here, which I do think this is his best movie, like, by far. I think it's Spielberg's masterpiece. I don't think he's ever done anything close to this, in my opinion. But yeah, definitely, I would recommend, if you see it. It plays a lot outdoors. Like drive-ins, and also just in a movie theater. Like, I've seen this film a couple times in the theater, first time in a Spielberg class in college, and it definitely, like, it blows you away even more seeing it on the big screen. So maybe the smaller screen might be a different. That I know you have a really nice large TV, but if you could even get into a theater to see Jaws, I would recommend it.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of this, what I'm saying, has to do with how I watched it. So
totally, yeah, I get it.
A little bit on me for sure, but in general, like, I have a thing about sort of quieter moments and breath. Mm-hmm. And I think this movie becomes a lot, scarier, which maybe this is not what they were going for. Mm-hmm. If you sort of have sort of more silent mm-hmm. moments in the movie. But, who am I kidding? This is a masterpiece. So, yeah.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.